so you can make use of that, or you could even potentially knock out a couple of Ralts in combination with the flying entry Howlucha. So it seems like a very tough matchup, but not undoable here. Not unbeatable, excuse me, for the Gardevoir, especially if you can get those big rare candies off, or maybe a Cresselia. And something interesting I just want to talk about, the Champions Festival, healing 10 damage across the board. That could come into play for sure.
For sure, indeed. We talked a lot about John Eng. Seen him on the main stage. Top 4 at LAIC earlier this year. Lots of solid placings in the top 4 and top 8s. Hamza Khan's actually somebody who's a local of mine. I played against them at Top Cut of a League Cup a few days back. Playing this Gardevoir deck, won that League Cup with that, took me down in the process of going all the way to top 8. And it's on a trek for a Worlds invite. Needs just a few more points to get there on the trek. So these tournaments are important for both players. For John, it's that day 2 invite. And for Hamza, it's getting to the World Championships. Prize cards go out. Important piece to note, that Kyogre, not a huge win condition in this matchup, but it is still a piece to note. Over on Hamza's side, nothing too relevant, so it looks like we're going to have a good match with all the cards necessary to make for a good one.
Definitely. A couple of Battle VIP passes there. You do want to see those early, and not the best prize cards to draw. But again, you can always refine them out once you draw into them. The Celebrations Kyogre being prized could matter in this matchup. I like having that in the deck. You know, having that option to just Aqua Storm definitely helps out. Keeps me at ease, right? There's always that comeback potential. So having in the deck definitely makes me feel a lot easier, but let's see if they play something like a Heavy Ball potentially to get it out. Looks like they do, so it's not out of the realm of possibility. I know that's something we really want to see on stream, like a big Aqua Storm. Yeah, always exciting.
Don't know if we'll see it this matchup, but hey, it's still a possibility here. I think we're ready to jump into things, though, between both of these players. I'm excited to see both these players at 4-0-1, so not at the perfect 15 match points, but are still very close to securing themselves a few more wins to get into day 2. I think we are going to just about jump into things here. I mean, John's playing a very standard list. It is playing those V Pokemon, playing the Raikou, playing the Dragonite. There is no Drapion, which, again, in there for the Mew matchup, but it can be powered up again with 2 Mirage Gate to take a one-hit knockout with the Dynamic Tail onto a Gardevoir EX. I feel like in this matchup, that might be an attacker that Hamza wants to go for and power that up over time, slowly with manual attachments. And from there, you have a clean Pokemon that's going to be trading 3 hits into it, 3 hits back. That's a positive trade here if you're taking 3 turns to knock out a 2-prize Pokemon.
No, exactly. I think Gardevoir EX actually is probably the main attacker here. 310 HP, very hard to deal with. The key card here is getting the attack off, though. You want to exert pressure as soon as possible. And Gardevoir EX is a stage 2, so those rare candies are going to be very, very important. And something I like to do as well as a Gardevoir player myself is, you know, once the Gardevoir's taken a couple of hits, you can actually use Collapse Stadium to get it out of harm's way. Or you can even attack with the Zacian if they have access to something like Penny, which they do. And if the Zacian could take a couple of hits off a Cramorant, and then you can heal that up with Penny, and maybe you can reuse it. You even have Palpad to reuse the Penny. That is the way. I think, again, the key for this matchup is Hamza has to be able to take a couple of hits, like waste a couple of turns. That's the key here. If John Eng is able to get the knockouts, some key knockouts they want to get necessarily, they very easily take the game here.
So we're just waiting on a sleeve situation, a split sleeve. It happens. You're playing Pokemon all day. It's bound to happen between those both. So I want to share a little bit of insight through how I played this matchup up. I had the same matchup, actually. I was playing a Lost Zone deck up against this, a very almost similar list to exactly what John's got going on. John is playing no copies of the Forest Seal Stone. Instead, going for the Pokegear option in order to try and pilot and play through this. But, I mean, yeah, as you said, there's a lot of great options on Gardevoir's end. Things like the Collapse Stadium, the Penny to heal, but a lot of the times it really just comes down to how often is Lost Box doing what they want. If they're getting turn 2, turn 3 Sableye, they're targeting down your Curlias, they're targeting down your draw engine. You have a lot of these great 1-ups, but if you can't dig through your deck, if you can't find these specific pieces, it's hard to get it going consistently. And sure, you've got Lumineon to search that out, but Lumineon is a terrible card to have down when you've got very limited ways to remove it out of play, and Lost Zone could set up easy plays towards the end of the game, take those big prize turns.
That's another key card I want to talk about in John Eng's this list is the Articuno with the Wild Freeze, actually. And Wild Freeze able to paralyze your opponent's Pokemon. And without, if you paralyze something like the Gardevoir EX, there's no real switching option for the Gardevoir deck. Because typically they want to attach the energy and they're just going to pay for the retreat anyway. So paralysis could definitely come out here. Again, that's the thing about Lost Box, right? There's so many potential lines, and it's determining which line I'm going to go to at this precise moment that really determines a good Lost Box player from, someone who has a couple of things to work with.
John has a lot of experience playing these Lost Zone decks, played it all the way back to when it was first legal in Lost Origins. And after that delay, we're ready to get into things here. And John, the big advantage starting off the turn, but what is there to work with? So let's get into the action here. Hamza Khan versus John Eng, round number 6 here. Hartford Regional Championships actually going to start things out with a flower selecting. I think it's just deciding whether or not you're forced to use a marker, but here we go. 2 cards, what's the choice? So
I believe it was a Comfey and a Nest Ball.
Yeah, so it's actually pretty weird on how you want to play this, because technically if you get rid of the Nest Ball and you get rid of the Comfey, you can thin 1 more Comfey out of your deck, but I think in John's perspective, it wouldn't hurt to just have 1 more Comfey, so especially when you've got certain cards like the Cresselia, which we haven't talked about as well, with that Moonglow reverse to put those damage counters off of your own Pokemon, put them onto the others. So here we go, getting into it. Nest Ball can grab out Pokemon.
I have to guess Radiant Greninja, just because there's so many energy in the hand, you might as well make use of them and start drawing a couple of cards there. But we see here, just going through a quick deck check again. When you're Lost Box, you have a lot of different Pokemon you have to work with. So let's see what choices we have. So John should figure out here very shortly that he doesn't have access to the Celebrations Kyogre, so now he can plan accordingly, right?
Yep. So Radiant Greninja, very solid grab. There's already a lot of energy cards. Does already have a switch card as well. So besides getting some Battle VIP Pass into play, which is every person's goal, however, looking at this list, I actually don't think there are any copies of Battle VIP Pass.
No.
So I think John maybe has had a run-in to not draw on Battle Pass enough, saying, listen, I'm usually using these to get Comfey down into play anyways, opting to play a Fog Crystal and 2 Nest Balls as well. What do you think about that sort of argument between just playing these search cards that aren't as powerful on turn 1 but consistent versus the pop-off potential of playing Battle Pass in your deck?
Again, it comes down to your experience with the deck for sure. I personally like the Battle VIP Pass because in Lost Box, yes, you have that potential to really pop off. And when you see that off something like a Flower Selecting or maybe a Chorus's Experiment, I love having that easy decision. But here, John may be thinking a lot of his deck space probably a little bit tight. Maybe needs to keep a lot of key cards for sure. But Nest Ball works fine here, getting the Radiant Greninja. Again, Radiant Greninja very important to draw, but as well as in this matchup. Again, able to do Moonlight Shuriken, 90 damage to 2 Pokemon. That's 2 Curlias potentially, if no Manaphy on board.
And going first, you do have that advantage. If you can get 2 cards in the Lost Zone, you do threaten on the second turn that Moonlight Shuriken, which means if you're Hamza, you've got to be thinking, if my opponent does what they want to do this turn, I've really got to start thinking about getting Manaphy down. There's the concealed cards. Gets rid of a Water Energy. Does have Switch Guard in hand. Looks like 2 of those now.
He has 2 Mirage Gates, and I'm not quite sure what the last Pokemon is. Potentially Dragonite?
Yeah, is the last one in there. So there's the Switch Guard. We'll put this Comfey up. As we continue the chain of flower selectings, have to imagine you're looking for Colress, and that is a pretty easy choice. Manaphy, not a card doing much in this. I think it's actually a little bit more risky than you'd think. There's been a deck floating around today that plays Gardevoir with Palkia to power up Pokemon, to use the Shining Arcana to power it up. So, I mean, listen, there's a lot of decks that use Curlia as their background option. You don't know what your opponent's playing. It is a little bit more of a risk, I think, than what would beat most people to just throw that Manaphy right away.
Exactly, exactly. And you know what? Even in Gardevoir, I've actually experienced some people playing the Galarian Articuno, the 120 to the bench. It's an interesting card, but there we go. A couple of Ralts now in play. So, still could potentially be that Palkia deck you were talking about. Again, that deck definitely scary. It does make use of Celebrations Kyogre as well, but here we go, Level Ball.
So this hand's not looking too great here for Hamza. Does have 2 Level Ball in hand, so that would be great for the following turn, but you have to sort of expect with 2 cards in the Lost Zone and 2 Comfey in play that your opponent is going to be able to utilize that Cramorant with the Lost Provisions ability to spit innocently. But of course, that Manaphy is importantly in the prize cards for Hamza, and he's going to find that out very quickly. Moonlight Shuriken cannot be stopped, and that is a huge card to not be having in this position.
Exactly. Very, very scary indeed. Looks like they're going to use the level possibly to get something like the Curlia. What are your thoughts on maybe a lot of the times I like to grab Mew in this matchup, especially if I'm expecting something like a Spitting instantly. It's a scary card to put, right? 60 HP. It's easily lost mineable, but a lot of the times you really need to dig for that rare candy. You need to put on that pressure, especially going second here. You'd love to have the Gardevoir EX.
It's so hard to put Mew into play because your opponent can always just play Escape Rope around it, and then eventually you're never leaving it in the active at the end of your turn because you're trying to attack. And not only does it clog up bench space, I mean, you want a lot of Pokemon down. You want as many Curlias as possible. You want Radiant Greninja down. You want Cresselia down, you want Manaphy down, and you don't have the ability to do all of that in terms of bench space, but we will just see a teleportation burst, 10 damage to this active, and John has a plentiful, strong hand to work with. Energy cards, Colress, Switch card, everything is working out perfectly here. If he can find a way to get one extra card into the Lost Zone, looking at this list, the only way that would be with one more Flower Selecting. He could be able to take a big turn. I have to imagine that's what he's looking to do. Moonlight Shuriken could just pretty much seal the game up. There's essentially no way, especially with no Psychic Energy in the discard pile, that Hamza rather will be able to react or respond in this situation.
Exactly. I think John here, not having access to something like the Forest Seal Stone, like we talked about earlier, also does not play something like the Lost Vacuum. Actually makes it a little bit tough to get 7 cards into the Lost Zone this turn. But again, it's not impossible. We're going to need a couple more comp phase. We do see the Hisuian Heavy Ball there. But
yeah, Hisuian Heavy Ball is actually great because there is, of course, the Pokemon hanging out in the prize card. So I can go ahead and grab that there as well. I think, yeah, Switch card and Energy going to be the situation here to get that discarded. Of course, that Energy was attached to the Comfey last turn, so does have the guaranteed pivot. And with this Hisuian Ball, check through those prize cards, find the Pokemon out of there.
I believe there was a Cram or the Celebration Kyogre, right?
Yeah, I have to imagine Cram is probably the choice here. And why do you think that is?
Oh, because it's the perfect turn. When you have 4 cards in Lost Zone, it's the perfect early attacker. You don't need energy. You know, if John is thinking maybe I'm not going to get the big Mirage Gate double knockout this turn, why overextend? We have the Cramorant, and it attacks for free. Let's take a prize.
Yeah, so John has his minimum. His bottom line is he'll be taking a knockout this turn at minimum with Cramorant. But as we've been talking about, have to imagine he'd love to be able to take 2 prizes super early. Probably with that level ball finding Curly, that's a big tell to your opponent that I probably don't have Manaphy, because if I did, it's always getting slammed down there off that level ball.
Exactly. I mean, taking down 2 Ralts this turn, I think that would be absolutely debilitating. Not only is that your opponent's draw engine, that's also your opponent's main attacker. What do we have here?
Yeah, there's a level ball, which I think means that this is possible as long as there's the energy in hand, and there is. So as long as John has the switching cards in hand, and as long as there are water energy in deck, I think the pieces are here. Level ball can find the 3rd Comfey, 2 switch cards plus the retreat, and the water energy in hand means that John can extend here, take this knockout, go down to 4 prize cards, and more importantly, remove both of these Ralts off the board. We'll have to see what these flower selectings can find, though. Things are looking very good here for John in Game 1.
Again, I like the level ball here, not something you see too often in Lost Box, because again, you do like the Battle VIP Pass, but this is one of those cases where having something like this instead of Battle VIP Pass definitely pays off.
This is so tough here. What do you get rid of? You want to have the Energy Recycler, but of course Colress is the backbone of this deck, and we'll finally now play the level ball. Can grab this last Comfey. Here we go. I think we're going to see it. Has already retreated, so just has to play 2 more switching cards. John will have 7 cards in the Lost Zone, activating Mirage Gate. That just opens the doors up. The floodgates start to open up for this Lost Zone deck.
Exactly, and the scary thing is, Hamza doesn't have a clear return knockout. He's going to need Rare Candy, Gardevoir, a couple energies in the discard pile to knock out the Radiant Greninja. And if he doesn't have that play, the Greninja can easily Moonlight Shuriken once again, since we do know he did get the Energy Recycler, and he has another Mirage Gate. And a lot of possibilities here for John, and Hamza definitely not in a great position.
Deciding to keep the Nest Ball. Says, hey, I've got enough pivoting cards in my hand already. There's the 7th. Energy's already in hand, so only has to use one of these Mirage Gate. And there are 5 water energy here, so this will be able to grab 1 water energy out of the deck, as well as a lightning energy. So it was also really crucial there that John didn't draw into any of those water energy.
Exactly.
Otherwise, he would have had to play the energy recycler for the not full effect to put it back in. So it was still guaranteed because he kept the recycler, but this is the best case outcome here. Radiant Greninja, fully powered up, has the attachment for turn, can even level ball or nest ball here to get Sableye into the actives, or rather get Sableye into the bench. And this is pretty much like how you cut it out. If I could construct any way to start your game off, this is like cookie cutter to the T, exactly perfect here for John.
Exactly what they want to see, right? I mean, when Lost Box has a hand of I think he has 11 or 13 cards at this point in hand, they can do pretty much whatever they want. They'll have enough switches, they'll have enough energy acceleration. It's definitely something intimidating to be sitting across of, and all they need here is one more switch. They even bench to cram. Maybe give them a little hope. They're only taking one knockout, but nope, it's going to be the Radiant Greninja there. Again, Moonlight Shuriken taking 2 prizes, 2 knockouts on key Pokemon, your draw support, your main attackers. I want to see how Hamza responds here.
Super powerful, super strong start here for John. There it is, Moonlight Shuriken knocking out the Ralts with the energy. And either or, I actually like going after the 70 HP Ralts. It's kind of weird, but if you leave the 60 HP one in play later, maybe it's good. At the same time, though, getting rid of it means you can Echoing Horn it back potentially next turn and try to set a play up that way. And it does look like Echoing Horn is in the deck here for John. But there it is, big turn here. And all you can really do is just shuffle those Pokemon back in. But of course, this Greninja is still here for the following turn. There's no way to find Manaphy. It's in the prize cards, no Hisuian Heavy Ball. So try as you might, recover these Pokemon as you are doing right now. As long as your opponent has a way to put the energy back and another Mirage Gate, they're going to take another 2 prize cards. And Wancho, I think it's not just me. That seems like too far to fall behind to be able to catch back up.
No, exactly. I can't think of a possible scenario. It has to be Rare Candy Gardevoir right here, right now. They do get like another Ralts and a level ball. They could potentially set up another Ralts here. Because if they just evolve into Kirlia, that's just 2 Pokemon. You can essentially lose that way. Something of note, I do want to say, taking a knockout on the Memory Skip, I think was a good move. You know, because if you use Memory Skip, you can't use Moonlight Shuriken potentially.
Sure, yeah.
But you know, you just have to switch, and Lost Box has like a million of those.
Yeah, it's just a little bit of an easier. Your situation here is, my opponent most likely doesn't have Manaphy because they didn't grab it. It doesn't matter what they use. Doesn't matter if they put the 70 HP, the 60 HP one in play. I'm taking 2 knockouts next turn.
100%.
It really doesn't matter. But there we go.
Just
Full
like
board
that,
finished.
though. Yeah.
Full board there. But the question again, doesn't really matter if your opponent already has the resources they need. I mean, if you're John, you're sitting there, you've got Mirage Gate in hand, you've got Energy Recycler, your opponent's already played their supporter for a turn, so you know your hand's not getting disrupted. You're kind of just sitting across the table and being like, sure, trade, use Refinement, draw cards, build your hand up. Doesn't matter to me when I've got what I need already in hand.
They do have Ultra Ball and a Forest Seal Stone, so they could potentially get, again, the Gardevoir EX next turn. I believe, I know exactly the play that has to happen to get Hamza back in. It's going to have to be Roxanne and hope Lost Box has no response.
There's nothing going on. It's going to be especially hard when John has continued to find Colress's experiment here, can play the Hisuian Heavy Ball, grab that Kyogre like we talked about out of the prize cards, and just continue to go through this deck. Still has so many resources available. We'll have one more Colress after this. He's only played 1 so far, already has Energy Recycler, already has access to a whole bunch of different pieces. Even concealed cards here for no risk because you are going to play the Energy Recycler, so you can bring all these energies back, grabbing pieces out of the deck you don't want. This is excellent for John here. If you're Hamza and you see your opponent sort of have the pieces here, I think the game is pretty much practically over. As you said, Roxanne, sure, it can buy time back, but what, 6 turns worth of time? Like, is that really realistic at this point when your opponent has set up so much, they've gotten rid of so many cards, and they still have so many resources in deck? There's still another 2 Energy Recycler and another 2 Mirage Gate that will be left after this turn.
No, exactly. I think you're right. This might be the time to scoop it up, go into game 2, reassess our game plan, because, again, when you're playing against Lost Box, this is, again, a deck that only plays, well, typically only plays single prizes against you, unless, of course, they decide to use something like their Dragonites or Raikos, for example. It's going to take time, and you don't, more often than not, into a game, when you force a game 3 and you take a while in your first couple of games, you might tie it up here. So
there it is. Big Energy Recycler. 5 energy back into the deck, and already has the Mirage Gate ready to go. You can power this Greninja up again. And if you're Hamza,
such a powerful move. This is
why Manaphy is in decks. If you need a reason to put Manaphy in your deck, you just have to imagine yourself in Hamza's shoes here. What do you do when your opponent's firing off Moonlight Shuriken after Moonlight Shuriken, and your deck is just struggling to set up? You didn't get the Pokemon down. Your entire support engine, 2 of those Pokemon that could evolve next turn into Refinement Kirlias, got knocked out. there's nothing you can do to except just sort of sit here and watch Greninja snipe down all of your Pokemon.
Yeah, exactly. And even if this Greninja goes down at this point, we do see the energy attached to that Sableye. Does need one more card in the Lost Zone to activate Lost Mine. We also see the Hawlucha in hand as well. So the possibility of just Echoing Horn for another 2 prizes potential. This game could be done by as early as next turn. As we see just Hamza evolving one of the routes into the Kirlia. Let's see what they have.
Getting rid of Penny. Like you said, though, does have Ultra Ball and Forest Seal Stone, so that means Roxanne is a potential to try and claw your way back into this game. Fog Crystal can grab probably the Zacian out of the deck. You can attach the Forest Seal Stone. You can also get energy cards. I saw Ultra Ball in hand as well, and that is still a piece that Hamza is missing. I believe only has 1 Psychic Energy and discard pile. This will make it 3. Now, of course, you don't need a lot of Psychic Energy. You're not trying to hit these big numbers against Lost Zone, but it definitely helps to have them there so that you can utilize Psychic Embrace and power them up. But I think this is the exact play we're talking about. Forest Seal Stone, not the V-Star power we typically see in this deck, can grab any piece out of the deck.
Do you go for Roxanne here, or do you go for the Rare Candy? I believe there's a Gardevoir already in hand.
I feel like Rare Candy's the choice? Wow, interesting.
Just to guarantee the attack here. Again, not the most defensive play. Your opponent has such a big hand here.
It's so tough. I mean, it's so tough because if your opponent has a way to get 1 more card in the Lost Zone, you're leaving yourself with a 0-card hand if they decide to Lost Mine and target down your wow, this is... Yeah. And this is so tough, too, because you're going to damage yourself here and put 60 damage, which means you're also now in perfect math for Dragonite to take a knockout.
Yes. Definitely not a good position. And again, you're also depending on drawing a prize. That's all you have to work with. Let's see what that prize is. An energy doesn't quite help out here. Let's see if John can close it out.
Let's see if the Dragonite is there, if the possibilities are there. Does have Energy Recycler in hand, but I think the last 2 Mirage Gate are still in the deck right now. Yep, they're both there, so it's not a possibility quite away, but does have Colress's Experiment, so that can dig through. Does already have 9 cards in the Lost Zone as well. So that means a single Flower Selecting plus a pivoting option and energy. So many cards allow Lost Mine to be online. And your opponent has only taken 1 prize card so far. You have so much time to close this game out.
Yes, Echoing Horn plus the Hawlucha is actually perfect math here as well. Again, so many routes. Let's see what they decide to take. Big chorus here, 5 cards.
Do we see, no Mirage Gate there. Does have Clara, access to the Nest Ball. Don't really need that piece. Do have access to some energy cards as well. I think it's just a pretty easy choice. Nest Ball, Raikou hitting the Lost Zone. The numbers have been achieved. John now having 10 cards in the Lost Zone. Still has access to the Comfey's Flower Selecting ability. The problem is the only pivoting cards in this hand are Escape Rope, which if you play, you have to also wonder what Hamza's going to bring up, because if you bring the Zacian up, then Dragonite does the same thing here at this point too. Does find the Water Energy though, so okay, I think here's the choice here. Is there enough energy to make this happen? I'm not quite sure. I think the Dragonite's here. Okay. I think the energy's here as long as John has a way to. Okay. I'm not sure if there's a. Oh, there is 2. Is there? Okay. So there's a Mirage Gate here. Puts the 2 energy on. The problem is if you Escape Rope, though, you can bring the Kirlia up.
Exactly.
However, this is guaranteed here. All the pieces are there. Because John has 2 Escape Rope, it doesn't matter what Hamza brings up here off of this. Can attach the Water Energy, play the Escape Rope, wait to see, because you have to react second, right?
Yes.
So if your opponent puts up the Kirlia, you put up Comfey, you play a second Escape Rope, it goes up into the active spot. And what a clinic there for John, putting on an absolute show, showing us this is the power of the Lost Zone. This is what this deck can do.
Again, we got to see it. Again, so many different options. Dragonite V, 250 damage. It's really, really big damage. At 310 HP, Gardevoir going down. I was mentioning it earlier that is the way to play there, but you're going to have to depend on some energy attachments for sure. Again, every single damage counter matters when you're playing against the Lost Box deck, and I want to see how Hamza responds. Again, unfortunate pricing. Manaphy definitely would have helped out there. Would have bought some time, but you also just have to think. Manaphy's 70 HP. That's another target there for something like the Lost Mine on Sableye. Again, it's a tough matchup in my opinion, but not impossible. I want to see Hamza take it back.
A lot went wrong there for Hamza. surprising Manaphy, definitely the big piece. But look at the other factors. I know you mentioned Roxanne, Penny. What are the big three in this matchup? The three things that you think need to go right here for Hamza to even this series up and potentially find a way to get some match points out of this round?
Again, to start putting pressure with the Gardevoir EX. Getting that rare candy into Gardevoir EX would be absolutely huge. Even attacking with Zacian potentially. If you have an active Zacian, you roar the sword and attach, then attach again the following turn. You have an attack even without Gardevoir EX, and then you can depend on something like Penny to reset that Zacian. Also, you have Collapse Stadium. You want, again, key here, get damage out of the board. Waste John Eng's turns, right? But let's see the prizes here. A couple of Pokegears, not too big. Cresselia is actually another big card.
Yeah.
Great attacker in this matchup, 130 HP, and you get to essentially kind of heal off your opponent, your bench, and move it over to your opponent's side of the field. So getting that prize a little bit tough, but let's see. But again, key here is getting, I think, again, just rare candy Gardevoir. It's just way too important.
And Hamza actually does this really interesting thing. This happened to me in my set where he actually likes to have Lost Zone players go first, or rather he likes to go second to start things out because you give yourself a better chance to get Battle VIP Pass to get into things as you're playing a supporter card to draw more. So that's going to be the choice here. John kicking things off. Has the flower selecting, but there is nothing else going on in this hand. Can put one card away to the Lost Zone, bench Cramorant, and it's all on Hamza to see how things are going. Does this time have Radiant Greninja. So this can utilize concealed cards, draw a few cards here, looking to find some Ralts. Does find one, as well as a Miriam. Not a card you want to see early. You want to have that later on. The question for me here is, you've got Ultra Ball, you've got Serena, you've got Forest Seal Stone. How do you play this hand out to try to set your board up as best as possible?
We might have to just Ultra Ball here, find Zacian, possibly even consider just using this Miriam right now, reshuffling in that Gardevoir, or you could go really aggressive, use the Zacian, Forest Seal Stone, maybe get Battle VIP Pass potentially, or even maybe a better supporter here, because that's why we made John go first, to use a supporter. But again, hand's a little bit too awkward in my opinion. But having the Greninja there in the active is great. Something I like to do in Gardevoir is definitely having Greninja in the active. Cresselia on the bench makes you feel safe against any innocent spits.
Sure.
But let's see what Hamza decides to do here. Again, with Forest Seal Stone, they should have a lot of options here.
So we're really interested to see what the choice is off this Forest Seal Stone. If this grabs something like Battle VIP Pass, if this wants to grab something like Research. A Miriam for turn is not a great draw. You kind of want to have that later on. Of course, recycling Manaphy is a great effect. You've also got Palpad, so you essentially get to put Manaphy into play 3 times if you want, and it is going to be that Battle VIP Pass. So we'll see the Battle Pass grab out to Pokemon. I'm sure we'll see potential. Now, this is a question. I don't think Manaphy needs to come down this turn, though. Of course, there is only one card in the Lost Zone, so even if you flower selecting 3 times and you play Colress, as long as there's no Lost Vacuum, as long as there's no other way to put an extra card in the Lost Zone, your opponent's not going to hit that number. But it's always a question you're asking yourself as a Lost Zone player or playing against the Lost Zone deck. What tricks do they have up their sleeve? That game went really, really quickly. And John did dig through a lot of deck, but not a lot of cards were played, so you don't have that information. You saw V Pokemon come down, and sometimes you have to think to yourself, well, if they got Forest Seal Stone, they're probably playing cards like Lost Vacuum with it.
Exactly, and that's the importance of not knowing your opponent's deck list, not having the open deck list there. You have to play around it, but you do see Hamza here just benching 3 Ralts, 1 card in the Lost Zone, maybe not a possibility. Especially you have to think they also don't have the Greninja just yet. Greninja is a great card to just have on the first turn, start drawing cards. But let's see here. Looks like the supporter for choice is going to be Serena. You have to...
I think you have to discard a card, unfortunately.
Yes, you have to discard a card, and then you draw up to 5.
Yeah, that's the issue here. You have to discard a card from your hand in order to play Serena. It's one of those effects where this is the issue you run into Serena as, yes, it's great to be able to gust Pokemon and have the effect of a draw, but it's not a great draw supporter. It's one of the weaker options. Sometimes it can even be worse than what Hamza wanted to do there, just draw 3 cards straight up. You have 2 options of discarding are 2 cards we've talked about being important. That Collapse Stadium to heal Pokemon off or move Pokemon out of play, and the Miriam to bring Pokemon back in. And I think Hamza instinctively was like, I don't want to discard any of these cards, so let me fill my hand up to 5, but unfortunately that's not how it works.
It does say it right there in big parenthesis, you must discard at least one card there. So unfortunate play here. So we're gonna have to decide. Just wait on a decision from the judges.
And it's not great either in terms of a judging perspective. And listen, behind the desk, we're no judging professionals. I mean, I've worked and organized and made calls in my own tournament series. But the main issue here as well with discarding is Hamza now has information about the 3 cards drawn.
Exactly.
So it's not as simple as just, oh, now discard a card that you draw, because you now have information about what you've drawn. So not sure how this will be treated, but of course, our great judging team, the staff here to help put this event on.
Exactly. I have full confidence in the judge staff.
It will be all good, yeah. So we'll be on a little bit of a talking point here as we sort of get the situation figured out. A lot of issues behind this here, but I mean, the way that Hamza was setting this board up, triple Ralts, there's one more bench slot for potentially, not the Cresselia. The Cresselia isn't the prize cards, but does have the bench spot for the Manaphy. And like you said, get Exhaustion down in combination with an attachment means that if your opponent is able to knock out one of your Pokemon, free the space up, or maybe put a Beach Court in play for your Greninja to retreat, you can start swinging with Exhaustion turn 2 without the need of Rare Candy Gardevoir.
Yeah, and if John even decides to play something like an Escape Rope, technically Zacian can take a hit here, right? Hamza does have 2 Pokemon that don't get knocked out by the Cramorant, so the Cramorant exerting a little bit less pressure. Again, ideally you do want the Radiant Greninja to get hit, but you know, if Zacian has to take a hit and then can swing back, at least you're taking a prize that way. Definitely here. But again, let's see. I also want to see Hamza's setup, right? I've been talking about it over and over again, is getting that Rare Candy Gardevoir, start swinging, and that's the key. I've even started experimenting with stuff like Arven, for example.
Okay.
That's a one card Rare Candy Gardevoir, right? You get the Forest Seal Stone, you get the Rare Candy.
Forest Seal Stone in your deck? Okay, that makes sense then, yeah. I was going to say, like, Sky Seal Stone doesn't really, I mean, it's like a worse Skyla, or it's like a worse Skyla in that case, but yeah, I mean, the Forest Seal Stone is not a card we've seen a lot in Gardevoir, but I mean, Hamza's making a great case
Hamza's
for
only
it, right?
playing the Forest Seal Stone. He doesn't play the Sky Seal Stone, actually, which is interesting for sure, but it's a lot better in matchups like this, right? Sky Seal Stone is essentially a useless card here. But yeah, trust me, I've gotten looks from Chip as well when I tell him that I like to play with Arven. So
we have some Arven lovers maybe in the chat, people who like that card, and we have people who are not the biggest fans. Arven's a weird card. I'm a big fan of it in certain decks like Miraidon, where you can grab things like Experience Share, you can grab things like Electricity Generator, you can even grab cards like Choice Belt to hit more math, or of course that Forest Seal Stone like we see in this case. But there are times where you just want to draw into more cards, you need to hit more things. You need to find more energy cards. You need to evolve Pokemon. You need to just see things. It's one of the risks you take when you're playing a card that only searches specific cards out and is your supporter card for turn.
Exactly, but again, against something like a Lost Box where you need to make a specific play, I think it just helps out a ton. That's why when I saw the Forest Seal Stone already in hand there and the Zacian for Hamza, I was thinking, you know, he's in a lot better position than the last turn. He has options to work with. He can start to put things together to really play against Lost Zone. At least having 3 Ralts means John can knock out all 3 at the same time, right? Possibly 2 get knocked out. And he has Greninja to start drawing as well. He's definitely in a better position, but again, unfortunately, didn't quite make some right plays there. Another thing I'd like to talk about is just, you know, John could still potentially attack with the Moonlight Shuriken, right? It's going to take 4 Comphase and a Chorus and a couple of
really
switches.
Hard. Yeah. For Comfey in play, I guess you do have one more bench slot for the Radiant Greninja.
Again,
so
it all lines up. It's possible.
This hand, I don't think the hand here for John is going to allow that next turn.
You never know. After a couple of flowers
like
that. But yeah, again, doing damage with the Cramorant is good, but I've been talking about it on and on and on. Getting those key knockouts, getting those key hits puts John in the best position, right?
So hopefully we'll get this resolved soon. I'm definitely looking excited to see how this matchup plays out. There may be prize card penalties adjusted, but it's part of the Pokemon trading card game. It's part of what happens in these situations here. But like you said, Hamza, a lot better start having that Manaphy, having triple Ralts down, and your opponent also not having a great start and a great way to get set up. Something you got to think about here, but man, we've seen the whole 2 sides of the coin here, right? heads being in John's last game, finding the exact pieces, finding everything that was needed for that turn to Moonlight Shuriken, followed up by a second Moonlight Shuriken the turn after, with the help of Manaphy being gone. And in this game so far, Hamza showing us the power of Forest Seal Stone, setting up, getting Battle VIP Pass, getting these Ralts into play, and still having the ability to play that supporter card to draw more cards.
No, exactly. I mean, who needs Celebrations Kyogre to take multiple prizes when you have Radiant Greninja, which really, it can take you 4 prizes apparently, especially very, very early. But let me ask you, Ethan, you seem like very experienced in the Lost Box deck. What type of Lost Box deck do you like to focus on, since there's so many of them?
Recently, more Kyogre, just the power of utilizing Kyogre, Mirage Gate. You have that end option, but you also have a really solid, strong option that you're not fully relying on Kyogre. Playing these V Pokemon, Dragonite is one of my favorite Pokemon as well, so I'm always happy to be playing Dragonite, and 250 is just a solid number to hit. Like you said, anything close to 280 is the magic number to sort of hit in this meta right now, in this format. Card does it very, very well. And you also have the consistency of Forest Seal Stone. It always felt so weird playing a deck like Lost Charizard or the single prize Lost deck, because every other deck is doing crazy things. They're grabbing 2 cards out of their deck with Starbirth. They're throwing energy into play with Star Portal, or they're grabbing specific pieces out, or putting on certain amounts of pressure. And your deck kind of just isn't playing one of those really powerful once per game effects that you have. It feels like you're back playing Greninja Break, right? Where every other deck has a GX attack, and you're out here just using Shadow Stitching turn after turn. But it feels like that's the last piece the deck needs. It combos great with the Lost Vacuum card that not only puts more cards in the Lost Zone, but can also act as a stadium removal card. It can also act as a way to get rid of your opponent's Forest Seal Stone. So I think that deck has a lot going for it, and it's the same reason that we keep saying this over and over again. The top players are on it, they're not changing, and they're still having success. Exactly.
If I have to share though, I've been playing mostly Gardevoir and Muse lately, but I've tried playing Lost Box a couple of times. I've seen when you're playing Lost Box, when you're playing against Lost Box, you never know what your opponent has, right? You mentioned earlier Lost Box Charizard, they don't have access to Forest Seal Stone. What about if I correct you there? What if you suddenly see a Pidgeot with the Forest Seal Stone?
Okay.
That's something I've seen as well. And again, I played in the Cup this weekend. I played Gardevoir, lost top 4 against specifically Lost Box Charizard because they went double Howlucha into Sableye. So again, you never know what Lost Box has for sure. Looks like we do have the game back.
I think we do. I think we are back into things here. And there we go. Looks like we're just going to see Roar of the Sword, putting a Psychic Energy on. I believe had a Psychic Energy in hand, but that really usually is a telltale sign that there's not a lot going on. Maybe wants to utilize Radiant Greninja. And to reflect that, Hamza has received a 2 prize card penalty. So John will need to take 4 prize cards this game in order to win the series. And that's a big deal in this matchup when it's usually down to the wire between those last prize to 2 prize cards. And even so, John can play this game completely differently now, play a lot more aggressive, sacrifice these 2 prize Pokemon if it means getting to 4 prize cards. It's something that's part of the game. It's not usually how you play it out, but when you're playing to win, this is something you have to take into consideration. It's a big part of how things work out.
Something we didn't get to talk about is, so Hamza did have to discard a card. It looks like it was the Collapse Stadium that had to be discarded there. Again, I kept talking about getting damage out of play. So not only does he have this prize card deficit, he lost a key card, I think, in this matchup. The Collapse Stadium, definitely big there. But let's see what John has in store for us. Does he have a chorus in hand? That's always the question here. When I'm up against Lost Box, do they have it? Do they have the supporter that just helps out so much, where it draws you 3 cards, sets up 2 cards in the Lost Zone? Very important card indeed. I believe that's why you picked it as the...
Listen, it's the backbone of the deck. Lost Zone Engine would not be as strong as it was if you weren't playing a supporter card that not only drew you cards and was consistent, but also filled you to get more cards in the Lost Zone. It's why Colress's Experiment is one of the most powerful supporters, not even just in the Lost Zone deck, but also in Arceus decks we see it being played. But
definitely.
Big choice here for John, I think, is whether or not you want to grab Comfey or Radiant Greninja here. What do you think about grabbing this Comfey instead of Radiant Greninja when you've only got 1 Radiant Greninja? It's always sort of this risk you take if you flower selecting into Radiant Greninja and a card like Colress that you also want during your turn.
I think getting the Comfey is fine here in my opinion, because again, technically, Comfey and Gradient Greninja both net you 2 cards, right? You get to see 2 cards in any case. And right now, by having only 1 card in the Lost Zone, again, you mentioned earlier, we want to play a little bit faster here. Comfey definitely helps out. Again, you're managing 2 resources, right? You want to manage your hand and Lost Zone. Right now, we only have 1. We got to speed things up. I think Comfey could be the definitely a good choice here.
This Comfey will retreat into the second one. One more flower selecting ability being used. And yeah, there's not a lot going on in this hand. So this will need to be a big choice. Ooh, this is tough. You want Hawlucha, but you need to just continue your turn. So has to grab the Nest Ball. This will fetch out another basic Pokemon out of the deck. Greninja could be a solid option. There is the Water Energy in hand. So we talked about which or which this. How about just both? How about having both options?
Exactly. And there it is. Greninja looks like being put to the top. I think he was thinking about it, though. Maybe a third Comfey as well could be a thing. But
so, yeah, it's weird because 3 Comfey here means that if there's a switching card off of this flower selecting, the Cramorant can attack. But if this Greninja doesn't find anything, then, or even if the Greninja finds a switching card, it doesn't matter because there's only 3 cards in the Lost Zone. The Lost Provisions ability is not online until there's 4 cards. And John will essentially have to pass the turn back, giving Hamza an opportunity to take the initiative and taking the first prize.
Yeah, it looks like it is going to be that Radiant Greninja, though. You know what? Concealed card's going to net me 2 cards. One of those 2 cards, one of those 2 is Chorus. I'm sitting pretty.
Every time, right? Every time. Well, as you mentioned, big concealed cards, 2 cards here. For John looking for Chorus or some way to continue the turn going.
Again, they have access to Pokegear as well. A lot of live cards here for John.
I think it was the switching card. Maybe makes you think, what if I had grabbed
the
Comfey instead and had been able to attack? But attacking into Greninja also just isn't a great feeling. Of course, the damage counters can stay on and eventually get moved off. John doesn't know that the Cresselia is prized, but Cresselia can just slowly throughout the course of the game move damage counters off of this Greninja, and it kind of puts you on a clock to find a way to remove these off, or rather take the Greninja out of play. I don't think there's much else going on, so John's going to pass the turn over to Hamza.
Yeah, again, typically, if I was Hamza, I'd be feeling good about that position. You know, my opponent didn't quite get the knockout, but he only has to take 4 here.
Wow.
So John has time to breathe. There it is.
What a great 2 cards off concealed cards. Had Rare Candy Gardevoir already in hand. Found double level ball off of that concealed cards. That is exactly what you want to see. The next step is just making sure there's a way to get this Greninja out of the active, and more importantly, Psychic Energy in the discard pile to power up this. More importantly, getting that Manaphy into play, understanding how crucial it was that wasn't down in game number 1, saying, listen, if you're in the deck, I'm grabbing you out, I'm putting you in play, and you're going to stay there, hopefully, until I don't need you anymore.
Exactly. Since John already has 3 cards now in the Lost Zone, 7 is not impossible. A lot easier to get into this next turn for sure. So getting that Manaphy right here, right now, very, very important. We still have a couple of refinements to work with. They have energy in hand. That means they can attach into the Greninja and start swinging here. So Hamza is going to be the one taking the first couple of prizes. Actually, his board looks beautiful, in my opinion.
It does have the supporter for choice. Miriam can put back this Gardevoir EX discarded, and then this Shining Arcana Gardevoir that was just discarded off of the refinement with Kirlia. And additionally, draw 3 cards. Still has access to potentially 1 more refinement ability if there can be another Kirlia found. Does still need to find an energy card to get this Greninja out of the active spot.
I believe he has the energy in hand.
Oh, does he? Okay.
Yeah. I'm just not sure how many energies he has in the discard pile to start swinging.
There's 1 minimum there, so attachment would guarantee it. So it looks like it is there. So at minimum, Hamza has sort of hit his turn goals. And look at that! Wow,
another rare candy.
Rare candy can rare candy into this Ralts that did come down last turn. And what a perfect turn 2, textbook turn 2 here for Hamza. Double Rare Candy, double Gardevoir, Shining Arcana. Doesn't find any energy cards, but there it is. The energy can retreat this Greninja. Double Psychic Embrace, or even it looks like triple Psychic Embrace. Choosing to bring up this Gardevoir EX. Maybe trying to, power up Zacian manually over the next few turns?
That's interesting. Again, I would have gone with maybe Zacian as the attacker here, because we've seen how devastating it's been putting 6 damage counters on a Gardevoir with when there's something like a Dragonite in John's deck. So a little bit suspect of that play, but again, right now what's important is Hamza's putting in the pressure while John's, is not as fast here.
John still unable to find Colress's Experiment, has dug through so much of the deck, and now a difficult choice. You're already down 1 escape rope. I feel like you have to value the Dragonite as a powerful Pokemon, especially on this turn. If you can find it. You've got to get rid of the escape rope, but it's just one less switching card. Did find Comfey off the top, so it does have access to utilize one more flower selecting, but it's flower selecting or bust here. Otherwise, the more turns you give Hamza, the more this double prize penalty starts to not matter. And again, nothing there. No Colress's experiment, no Pokegear, no way to get this engine going and rolling.
Looks like they do still have access to a level ball here. Could find the 4th Comfey.
There it is. and John sort of understands at this point. Like, listen, I'm not out of it. I still have I have a 2-prize lead to start things out. So even if Hamza takes the knockout next turn, it's like we're playing on an even ground. Sure, his board is more set up. He's got more things going than me, but I'm not out of it by any means. Does have 2 switching card in hand. And also has access to an energy to retreat. But here we go. Another big flower selecting. Do we see Colress's experiment? No Colress. It's another choice of getting rid of a 3rd escape rope in order to keep this Mirage Gate in hand.
Again, I was talking about this earlier, where when you're not playing Battle VIP Pass, it almost feels as if every flower selecting here has been absolutely painful. Because every card is important here, and it's just a matter of what you prioritize, what you think you need more, and it looks like it's going to be the escape rope over the Mirage Gate. I think I like that, because doing 110 damage into the Gardevoir, I don't think that's going to matter here. You're going to want to knock out that Gardevoir with something like the Dragonite.
Yeah.
But
it's the same. It feels like if you play Escape Rope, though, Greninja just comes into the active spot.
That's
and also
true.
just takes the 110 damage. And I mean, Battle Pass is a really interesting situation. It feels like every time I play Battle Pass, I go concealed cards and I draw into 2. But whenever my opponent plays Battle Pass, they play Colress and they get rid of their 4 Battle Pass after turn number 1. But
exactly.
There's the retreat. I believe has not committed the energy yet for turn. Has just utilized concealed cards, so can still retreat for turn. Does still have that option. Does also have access to a switch card as well. So yeah, there's the concealed cards. Playing the switch card as well. Putting this Crammer into the active spot. Here we go. It's going to be a Spit Innocently, setting this Gardevoir up to get 2 hit knocked out. Does now have 140 HP left. I mean, I don't think the math is super relevant. I mean, I guess Lightning Rondo now is in range to take a knockout.
There's a couple more options for sure. Again, I'd still rather see the 110. Even on something like the Greninja, it does set up plays where you can use Sableye to still take multiple prizes, right? Right now, this 110 damage onto the Gardevoir, it's a little bit underwhelming because, again, you're going to have to depend on your big V Pokemon to take this knockout anyway, in my opinion.
It's hard. It's really difficult. It does commit the energy to the bench Comfey and says, hey, listen, I'm going to put some pressure on here. If I can route my game plan and knock out this Gardevoir and knock out the Zacian, it's all I need here to stay in this game and take knockouts.
You know, at the same time, it's possibly we're putting the Cramorant in the active here just because we don't want our Comfeys knocked out, right? I mean, if I'm going to pass anyway, might as well do 110 damage.
Yeah, you do have to get rid of one more switching card, though, which could be helpful later on if you want to continue to use Flower Selecting. I mean, look at the Lost Zone here for John. 3 of those 4 escape ropes already in the Lost Zone.
That's true.
We are just going to see sort of the draw party start here for Hamza. Arcana Shine and Refinement does find the Judge, like you mentioned. That is one way to slow down Lost Zone. Play Roxanne, play Judge. They've got to hit their quotas every turn, and it's hard when you're consistently making it hard to find those Colress's Experiment. However, for John, there's still none in hand, so I feel like he'd actually be more than welcome to have a Judge here to get another roll at finding Colress.
Definitely. That's a tough choice there. I'm debating it in my head. Like, do I Judge here? My opponent has an absolutely huge hand, but how useful is that hand? You know, that's the question. And just like that, we're going to see a second Gardevoir EX in play now, and not too many easy targets now. And as we do see the Judge being played, let's see, going to be big 4 cards. I'm just going to assume it. John should be able to draw into a Colress here, right? He has 4 in deck.
Right? Surely he finds Colress this time. And it's actually a really interesting choice to evolve Gardevoir EX. I feel like you still want the ability of Kirlia to at least draw some more cards, but at the same time, if you leave that in play, your opponent can set up a pretty easy route to win this game. Lost Mine, knock out the Kirlia, knock out the Manaphy, and knock out one of these EX Pokemon. But now, or 2 prizers rather, but now that's no longer an option, as we are going to potentially see this Gardevoir retreat into the other Gardevoir. Now, this does take away some potential for, as we said, some of these V Pokemon like Raikou even to take a knockout, but at the same time, you're still just putting more damage counters on your other Gardevoir. Eventually, like we said, every time you pivot, every time you switch out, you're having to use Psychic Embrace, you're having to put damage counters on, and Hamza just deciding, hey, I'm going to keep this in play, I'm going to take the knockout, and hope that you don't have a way to start taking prizes to respond to me.
Exactly. I think it's fine to stay in the active there, but there is some there is a good reason to retreat there. Right now, the Gardevoir on the bench actually has 1 energy attached. So that means if we use Psychic Embrace, we're only putting 2. That is out of range of something like a Dragonite, for example.
Yeah.
So there was a reason, but I don't mind attacking here again. And if I really like evolving into the Gardevoir EX there. It kind of protects your board. And you still have your draws in any case with the Shining Arcana Gardevoir. And right now, I think Hamza actually has pretty much everything they need to win. Right, everything's on board already. I'm not going to need to draw into anything else. We have energies from the discard pile. We have all our attackers in play. All that's missing is, you know, maybe trying to get a Roxanne potentially, or maybe another Judge. So I like the position. I definitely like the position.
Great position for Hamza, but I would say even better for John. Found Colress off that Judge, able to finally get some more cards in the Lost Zone, find some resources. Looks pretty tough choice here, though.
Yeah.
Has Mirage Gate in the hand, so this will put him up to 8. Has Nest Ball, has the Psychic Energy, has access to, like we were mentioning, maybe utilizing Raikou to take this knockout, and then using Dragonite for the next, and then trying to finish it off. But the problem is, Hamza being at 4 prize cards means you have to be careful utilizing these 2 prize Pokemon, or you can fall behind in this prize race.
Exactly. I think, yeah, you definitely want to take a knockout at this point, right? Hamza's been has been exerting a lot of pressure, but right now, looking at the Chorus, it seems like a very, very tough Chorus.
I think the choice is you can get rid of this Lightning Energy because you have Recycler now. It means you also have the Gate already in hand, and you have the Water in hand. So this actually works out perfectly.
Okay.
You can utilize the Dragonite now to take the knockout. If Zacian is still on the bench with a full bench, it means that Lightning Rondo can take the knockout, do 220 if there's full benches for both players.
Unfortunately, I don't think they play any form of Gust, I believe.
No,
so.
But it depends on what comes up next turn.
Exactly.
Right? So that's the problem. Of course, Sableye could set math up on any of these Pokemon. We could just see 2 Sableye Lost Mines take the knockouts, right? You can put 7 on the Manaphy, put the rest on the Shining Arcana Gardevoir, and then finish that off. There's a lot of plays here, but the main thing here, John, big find there, finally getting Colress's Experiment. It was so heartbreaking to not see that after so much dig on the following turns, choosing to just use concealed cards first, not playing the Mirage Gate. I have to wonder if he's maybe looking to find another attacker to power up, such as that Snorlax there, which has the math to take the knockout onto this Gardevoir.
That's true. Okay, okay. So that Cramorant hit actually very big here. Now they could depend on something like the Snorlax instead of the Dragonite. Let's see if they decide to do that. Again, Dragonite, a lot safer an attacker. If you attack with the Snorlax, you're going to want those switching cards in case they don't knock it out. It could be scary. They could start attacking around the Snorlax, for example, but with something like the Cresselia. And, but yeah, we'll have to see here. Looks like it is going to be the Snorlax with the Thumping Snore attack, 180 damage there. But again,
yeah. So I think the choice here for John is always a fear, is if you play Mirage Gate and you don't have the energies you need in your deck to be able to attack. But I believe John does. I believe there is a Lightning Energy and a Water Energy, and that's just sort of John's fear right now, is where so 1 Lightning Energy in the discard, 1 there, and there's a Water Energy still in the deck, because there's only 1 in the discard pile, 1 in hand, so the energy pieces are there, and this way you don't have to burn the Energy Recycler. Let's see the pieces there. As I said, 2 energies there. Snorlax, my boy,
those
coming
are the last
in
2.
with Thumping Snore,
Two.
the last 2 energy there, right? But you're playing on such thin margins. I think that's an interesting point to talk about, where, I mean, plays like this, right? We have just enough energy in play. That's sort of the status quo here for a deck like Lost Zone.
Exactly. I mean, this is where knowing your deck inside and out, really determining, you know, you have to know what your resources are, what's in your prizes, especially for a deck like this, where, yeah, they can use the Mirage Gate. I believe they had a Recycler anyway, but we're waiting for full effect for a better moment for sure.
Well,
so
it's better, too. I think the main point here is by putting a bunch of energy in your deck, it means that if you get judged, if you get your hand disrupted, these are pieces that you don't want to find, and also they're terrible to find off Colress because you're a lot of times just forced to get rid of them.
That's
You'd
true.
rather have them in your discard pile than your Lost Zone, because it's lost forever when it's away in that zone.
Do see a Flower selecting here. Another tough choice. Looks like a Switch card and another Mirage Gate. I would value the Mirage Gate here, since we might have to set up another attacker after the Snorlax.
Yeah, the Mirage Gate's great because you can always just retreat, right? You can always Mirage Gate and put an energy on. That's sort of the play. Has Dragonite for next turn. Not much else going on, but hey, you've still got 3 Colress in the deck, and you're taking a 2 prize knockout here. Snorlax coming up to the active spot. Thumping Snore, 180 damage, taking the knockout onto Gardevoir EX. And John, because of that prize card penalty on Hamza's side, is just 2 prize cards away from advancing to 5-0-1 and wakes up off the flip.
Who needs to switch when Snorlax can just wake up?
He said, I'm close to victory. I'm waking up for you. I'm staying strong for the next couple of minutes. Then it's nap time for me.
Exactly. As we see here, Hamza just promoting the Gardevoir EX. Again, that is the more ideal attacker. We can't attack with the Zacian anymore. It's a little bit too risky. So I don't think this Gardevoir is enough to take 4 prizes.
It's hard, so you can knock the Snorlax out, go to 3, but the issue is if Dragonite attacks into it, Sableye is right there to follow up, take those last 2 prize cards, and you can see how Hamza's in such a great spot in this game if there was no prize card penalty here. It's the nature of how things work, but Hamza still has an opportunity because, as we've seen, Judge is a great disruption card. Having played that before, can put it back into the deck with Palpad. I think is really just relying off of the Shining Arcana and potentially concealed cards to find that Judge to maybe disrupt the hand for John, put him down to just a little bit less cards in hand, try to steal this game away by pretty much just hoping that for the next couple of turns, John has nothing going on. But actually, no.
Big research
Gonna be
instead.
the Professor's research, discarding the hand, drawing 7 cards, maybe trying to find that Roxanne or that Judge for the following crucial turn. Hamza's going to be 1 to 2 turns away from winning this game.
Yeah, the awkward thing here, it's so awkward to think of, is technically John's 2 prizes away from winning the game, but Hamza can't use Roxanne.
Yeah, that's the issue.
That's such a tough position to be in. Hamza does go down to 3 prizes here, but it's still essentially 3 knockouts, 2 potentially if John decides to bench a V, which I would assume they wouldn't unless it's for game.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you're confident, you can follow up with Sableye. Hitting into this is not bad. You know your opponent's actually down their collapse stadium, so they have no way to remove this, and there's no way to pick off or get rid of Gardevoir on your board.
But just look at that. Oh, sorry, I thought that was the hand there for a second. That was the deck.
No, we're not that lucky right now. John can get there if he finds Colress's experiment, but for the time being, that's not how it's going to be. Interested to see what cards are in hand here. There's the flower selecting.
Ooh, Echoing Horn.
It does have access to Articuno, which again is great at paralyzing this Gardevoir. Try and keep it up, but I don't know if the resources are quite there. And here we go, big Pokegear, 7 cards. No Colress being found, but does have access to Clara.
Clara's not a bad...
I mean, what do you even want to put back? You can at least get some cards here to concealed cards. You can bring back the Cramorant to at least maybe apply some pressure to this Gardevoir. But
is there a Sableye in the discard pile?
I think there might be, as long as there's none in the hands. Let's take a look and see.
Here. Because Sableye would be a great attacker here, in my opinion. Maybe start...
I think it's there.
Just start spreading damage on board again. We know there's no class. We could potentially just set up the Radiant Greninja and Manaphy knockout later down the line.
Yeah, there's a lot of options you have. You can even knock the Manaphy out and put 4 damage counters onto this active Gardevoir to put it into Dragonite range. And then also, actually, that math kind of works out well. You can put 7 on the Manaphy, 4 on the Gardevoir, and then 1 on the Radiant Greninja, so that you give yourself 2 options next turn to win the game. But
that's true. But if you knock out the Manaphy, that does put you down to 3 prizes,
that's
which
the issue,
is susceptible to something like Roxanne.
So we'll have to see how John decides to play this game out. Did hit the magic number, 10 cards in the Lost Zone now, and has Escape Rope, which he drew off of the prize cards.
So, interestingly enough, they even have the Echoing Horn here. So if they had access to something like the Howlucha, they would have won this turn.
Yeah, so I think you're pretty confident at this point. I think Palpad and Penny are both down at this point. So if you put damage counters onto this Greninja, you're pretty much putting yourself, I think, on a 1-turn clock to try and pretty much close this game out. Again, we'll be really interested to see where John decides to put these damage counters. There's a lot of ways you could spread this out. Fact is, John's on a 2-turn clock to win this game. And it looks like there's nothing Hamza can do to stop him except to try and maybe disrupt his hand in some form or way. Yeah, there we go. Lost Mines coming out.
There's some argument to putting the damage possibly on something like the Shiny Arcana Gardevoir. Yes, it has 10 more HP than Radiant Greninja, but it is... You can't penny. You can't penny the... Shiny Arcana Gardevoir, so you can only use it on a basic Pokemon. So again, I'm so curious.
I think the risk here is, I think there's also like a really random world where you could like power Dragonite up and pretty much set this checkmate scenario on the board where you knock this Manaphy, you put the damage counters on the Gardevoir, and you say, hey, like even if you boss me up or whatever, like I've still got 10 damage on your Greninja, so you can't heal that off.
I like that play. I love having checkmate on board for sure, but right now, bench is full, and Cramorant was benched there.
Yeah. And also, we keep forgetting Champions Festival could heal the 10 damage off the Greninja. So
that's true.
That's something John's thinking about at this position.
That's actually something I would love to see, the Champions Festival. We have around 5 minutes left in the round here, so John could close it out definitely within those 5 minutes. But
yeah, I think it's weird. Like, we do have 5 minutes left, but we are actually going to do, I think, the same play that I talked about, where you put 10 damage here, you put 4 damage counters on the Gardevoir potentially, and that way you set it up for Dragonite. I feel like that's yep. And
okay,
John's going to do that exact play. Try and just pretty much set it up to say, hey, whatever you attack with next turn, I've got a response to.
So it has to be here, Roxanne into...
It's got to be Roxanne or Judge, and there is the Roxanne in hand.
Roxanne into Champions Fest.
Not just Champions Festival. Remember, you can only use Champions
and
Festival if you
Pokemon.
have 5 Pokemon on your bench. And that's sort of the problem I think people sort of overestimate with Champions Festival is on paper, if it just said heal 10 damage from each of your Pokemon, yes, that would be a great stadium card. But you need to have 5 Pokemon, which is super hard late in the game when your opponent's constantly targeting down your Pokemon. Let's see it here. 6 cards. There's the Champions Festival. Does find 1 Pokemon. But there's no basics. There's just, that's it.
All right, let's see here. If John has it, does he have...
Oh, there it is. There's the Clara. So the Clara is there, and I believe there's a Mirage Gate as well in the hand.
Yeah, that should be
has the Energy Recycler and the Mirage Gate. Can put this back on. 12 damage counters on the Radiant Greninja. John pulling this out, advancing to 5-0-1, showing us how it's done with the Lost Zone deck.
What an exciting game indeed. Again, looking at Lost Box honestly makes my head hurt. There's so many options, and we got to see one of them. Again, we were arguing back and forth about what damage counters go where. I wanted to play around the Roxanne. You wanted to set up Checkmate. Looks like you were the right one there. Setting the 10 damage on the Greninja did stick, but boy, it would have been so cool to see Champions Festival.
Card everybody's been talking about, healing damage off. It feels like it's never seen play. It's been a Worlds promo. People have loved the artwork. People have loved checking out how it changes through every year. I'm excited to see if we get Champions Festival this year again as a World Championship promo. But never really has seen competitive play at all. Just kind of been here, never saw play like Tropical Beach did and expanded and when it was legal in the standard format. But Gardevoir EX is one of those few decks where trying to get damage counters on, pairing well with the